Everyone likes some piece of media they're not super proud of. Whether you've secretly watched Jason Statham's classic shark flick, The Meg, enough times that you know the script off by heart, you can recite every Fall Out Boy track listing in order without the vowels, or you can't be trusted with the aux chord at parties because you refuse to put on anything other than Mambo number 5. Normally, this is the bit where I say, I know you've got guilty pleasures and I want to know about them. Except this week's guest doesn't have any guilty pleasures. When I asked what she thought she might want to talk about, she thought about it for a full hour and then said, maybe Marvel's Iron Fist, but I'm not really ashamed of it. I just think he's a bit hot. Grace Sharkey is an academic at the University of Sydney. She writes about feminism, queer theory, and popular culture. She's also my best friend, and I proofread her PhD on pornography, which was fun for me. We're movie buddies. We'll both defend Magic Mike XXL's status as a cinematic masterpiece to the death. And despite her questionable taste in martial arts, guys, we both love action movies. So, what do you talk about when you both actively watch basically everything? Great question. This episode's going to be a nightmare for Wes to edit because we both love to talk over the top of each other. I'm Alex.
I'm Grace.
This is Pop Culture Boner, the podcast edition, and today we're talking about the concept of pop cultural guilty pleasures. Hi, Grace.
Hi, AJ.
This is weird. You've immediately become self-conscious.
I know. Well, I always thought this would be awkward because we're best friends and it's strange to be on your podcast. And then you thought that was weird. And immediately as you did the intro, you lost your mind.
Yeah.
Because it is weird.
Especially weird because I'm looking directly at you and it's like, hi, I'm Michael Parkinson. Welcome.
We don't usually sit this far across from each other.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned in the intro, Grace Sharkey, the last thing you felt mild guilt about watching.
Mild guilt about enjoying.
Iron Fist.
Iron Fist. Marvel's Iron Fist. Yeah.
Did it last for more than one season?
It did have a second season. I did not watch it. I tried and was uninterested. Yeah, so I have guilt about watching, not guilt about watching it, guilt about enjoying it, particularly because I didn't really like or watch Luke Cage, or I didn't really love Daredevil, although I don't mind it. It's again, but they were the kind of the cool version. Punisher, you loved Punisher.
I loved Punisher.
I could not. Iron Fist, that's my guy.
I think this is probably the Grace Sharkey, Alex Johnson divide.
Yeah.
In that I like the man who was so tortured that he decided to punch everyone in his life to death. And you liked the rich orphan who did martial arts. And if we were to divide the action guys that we like up, that might be the line, I think.
It's one of these things where in some senses we're on the same page usually about these things. There was something about little Danny, Marvel's Iron Fist, that really took hold. And if I'm really serious about it, it's actually the love interest in that show that entices me more. Whose name I now forget. But she's very hot and that's usually enough for me. And you'll find as we probably move through the episode that a lot of the time, if you really ask me why I like something, I say everyone's very beautiful. And that's very satisfying to me.
Yeah.
But I had guilt, or I had to pause about liking the show because, of course, many of you will remember, but the show was very controversial because it's about this white man who is, fantastic at martial arts. And it upset a lot of people for reasons that obviously I agree with, right? And also the show itself does a lot of strange kind of pan-Asian stuff where you're never totally sure if people are from Japan or if they're from China and which part of, it's very like Asia.
Yeah. Interestingly, I read an article on Iron Fist while I was writing about Steven Seagal. Because I was thinking about like kung fu movies and stuff. And like, that's kind of a theme from the comic book as well. So one of the things that they talk about with Marvel's Iron Fist is that the comic was, and the popularity of kung fu movies and some of that comic book stuff was this response to the Vietnam War.
Right.
So it's this like generically Asian stuff.
Yeah, this kind of yellow terror.
But also so that they're like mystically undefeatable characters.
Right.
Because something about Asia
is
like mystical.
The East.
Yeah, the East, and like
Yeah.
is therefore unknowable, and that's
Right.
how America processed its trauma post-Vietnam War of like, why couldn't we bomb the shit out of them? Oh, it's because they're magic. It's fine.
Right.
That's an aside.
No, but totally. And in the show, you know, the different kinds of martial arts that are going on. Some people are doing kung fu, some people are doing karate. That doesn't exist on racial lines, which I guess in some ways is a kind of perhaps somebody's imaginary of a deracialized utopia, but it is not the world we live in, you know.
My own personal deracialized utopia. Everyone does some form of martial art.
But not on each other, just as fun. Like, it's just for fun, you know.
It's just a
There's
nice
no
time.
fighting in the utopia. The show has its own problems that I absolutely don't want to deny. And part of the reason that we're talking about in this episode is because I don't deny them, because they're definitely real. And I work with an academic called Megan Morris, who's very famous, and one of her areas of expertise is kung fu and martial arts films. And there was a time where we were talking about Iron Fist, and I was like, I'm really enjoying it. And she was like, I'm interested in the controversy, but I should really watch it so I know what I'm getting into, because there must be something going on. She sort of was implying that, like, in the same way that I've enjoyed something about it, she was like, I'll probably enjoy something about it too. And I gave her my Netflix password. This was a few years ago. And it was actually my dad's Netflix password, but that's okay. Thanks, Bill.
Shout-outs to Bill.
Megan hated it. She really didn't like it. And she said, you know, this terrible thing where this white man is meant to be kind of almost better at martial arts than the other people. And something you had said too when we'd spoken about it initially was that it wasn't good martial arts.
Yeah, well, that was one of the reasons because I also like kung fu movies, and I like good fight choreography. That's my jam. And one of the things that I like absolutely couldn't get past I watched one episode of that show, and I couldn't get past the fact that he just obviously had zero martial arts training, and he was supposed to be the best and like the savior.
Yeah.
And it was like, this man has no core strength. I don't know what he's doing. It was very ungraceful.
Yeah. Whereas I was just like, punching. I like it when they punch. It's nice. It's fun, you know. And so here's this show that isn't good, that is critically panned, that is controversial. And it's not controversial in ways in which I can have any meaningful, sometimes when things are about gender or about like other kinds of representation that I might have stakes in, maybe I can be like, well, I think it's fine. Yeah. I don't get a say here. No. It's nothing to do with me, right? And so and I'm not defending this show, but I am fascinated to this day of why it caught hold on me so intensely. Is it just because that chick is hot? Maybe. But also, I just liked it.
Yeah.
But it's the only show that I've felt recently that I wouldn't want someone to know. I wouldn't tell someone on a first date. You know, what's a show that you love?
Second date material.
but perhaps not, right? I'm saying it on this podcast, so I guess, you know, it doesn't.
It's out
there now. But it's a guilt not because of a lack of capital or a lack of esteem. It's a guilt because of, I guess, there's a sort of unknowable, you know, what about it touched me? Again, might just be hot.
Could it be the Iron Fist?
Yes, Alexandra.
It's important to me that I get at least one fisting joke in per season, and I've nailed it.
I didn't realize the podcast was so blue.
Just a little blue.
Well, I'm here. So
yeah, we're gonna make it.
I had to bring the smut.
The concept of guilty pleasures is what we were going to talk about today.
We're going conceptual, baby.
Because you and I feel, are particularly unabashed in enjoying a variety of media.
Sure.
So, when did you decide to stop caring about guilt while consuming pop cultural products?
I don't think I can pinpoint a moment, but I can see an overarching decline. In caring less about what the things I loved said about me, but also having less. If I'm totally honest, I feel, and we've gotten quite intense quite quickly, but I feel like with the declining mental health, it came less energy to watch French art house films, and I just wanted the media that I consumed to make me happy.
French art house doesn't often do that, tragically.
Look, it has I dated someone for some time who only after we broke up did she find out that I even liked French film, despite being someone who loves French film herself. And I was like, I purposefully hid it from you because I didn't want to get on that level with you. You went to film school and I love Magic Mike XXL. And that's how I wanted us to go out. Also, with that kind of shift, I guess, in the things that I loved, it became less important to me to find people who, for example, liked the same music as me or liked the same, who wanted to go to film festivals as me or those sorts of things. Like that kind of identification became less important. Where I feel like sometimes now when you meet someone new and they, you know, they mention this author that you love, your heart still does a little flutter, you know. That moment matters and I'm still seduced by that moment as much as anyone. But I feel like what I like is now less about who I am and more what I want.
Do you think that that's like an age thing?
Yeah, I do think that's an age thing in part. I think that when you're younger, you're constantly trying to figure out who you are and make sure that other people know. And so if you're constantly grappling with your identity and your investments and who you fit in and who your friends are, and if you're, you know, wanting to be a particular kind of person who hangs with a particular kind of crowd, you need to know the right movies and the right directors and the right cinematographers, or even name a single cinematographer, which there was a time in my life when I could do that and that time is long gone.
Thank God.
I just know that some films are blue and some films are yellow. David Fincher's films are yellow or blue. Soderbergh's films are yellow. Catherine Hardwicke's films are blue. You know, those are the things I know about cinematography, and by God, do I care about that. But beyond that, you know, now that I'm older, I feel like I just want to have fun.
So this is like a broader thing that may be slightly off the topic of guilty pleasures, I guess. But in terms of like particular types of online fandom and age groups that build up around them, lots of those are for media that isn't what we would traditionally consider good. So in terms of like building a fan culture around that, why do we think that some people hang on to this concept of like not a particularly good piece of media, but not feeling any guilt about it and like overly diving into it?
I don't think the question is that they don't feel guilt about it. I think part of how fandom develops is because of a kind of shared guilt or a shared, we don't want to feel guilty about this, but we know other people will make us feel guilty about this. And so we have this thing together where you're kind of, you have this special secret that is the thing that you love so much and you get to share it guilt-free with other people who share that investment. So I think they're actually produced by guilt as opposed to absent of guilt. But also I think that fandom often develops around things that we might not consider to be good. Again, same trick in that I think suddenly when things have fandoms, they feel not as good because fandoms are also often things that like the presence of a fandom is an embarrassment sometimes, you know, like, and like caring about anything too much is like embarrassing. If you think about like the classic like Trekkie of being this like loser type figure in his basement, you know. Having said all that, I think there is another level, another layer where a lot of the things that people become really big fans of or fandom develops around often are things that have a kind of like emotional register that is very seductive. So obviously the thing that keeps popping up in my mind is Supernatural, of which we are both theoretically fans, but I've never watched past the 6th season.
Yeah, as far as I know, it ended after season 6.
I don't think I've actually finished the 6th season. I think seasons 1 to 5 are incredible and great television. Yeah. Truly fantastic TV. And it's not out of shame or guilt that I haven't kept watching.
No,
it's out of wanting to have a good life. You know? It's out of like it's out of not wanting to hurt myself, you know. Yeah. But of course, you know, the show is so emotionally connectable, if you will. Like it's so, you know, it's life and death and it's brothers and they're sexy, but also, and there's never any female character that lasts longer than a couple of episodes because the second a woman turns up in the show, they're like, kill her, because it's like, Sam will only date me, you know, and then the show obviously then plays into that idea and reflects it back at its audience. And so, you know, it's a show that is only built for its fandom. And thankfully it had a big enough, thankfully or concerningly enough, it had a big enough fandom to be able to sustain how many? Is it 13 seasons?
15.
Jesus, mother Christ, that's so many seasons, you know. And, you know, it was able to do that based on having such fervent fans. But I think the idea of shame or guilt and a sort of emotional intensity are all things that you can't take them away from each other. They all connect, you know.
Yeah. What you were talking about in terms of the kind of cultural capital of Iron Fist is kind of a good transition point into the article that I read by Professor Catherine Driscoll and
Dr. Sean Fuller.
Dr. Sean Fuller about HBO's Girls, which had a similar level of controversy, I guess, around representation.
Absolutely. And was one of the, at least from my memory, it was a massive cultural moment, I think, in terms of those questions really becoming at the forefront of questions of representation and questions of representation in general. People were obviously always having these conversations, and I'm sure people of color were yelling them for years, right? But it was the first time I remember as a person who cared about things like this, where suddenly everyone went, hey, wait a second, everyone in the show is white. Everyone in Brooklyn, not white.
Not white.
And it was like, oh, shit, true, you know?
Yeah.
And it was a big shift, a shift that needed to happen. But I feel like that show was a bit of a turning point.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting in terms of some of the things that Catherine was saying about it, in that she was talking about the concept of quality television, high production values, weighty themes, that sort of stuff.
Sure.
In terms of like Girls, it's obviously coming into that era of like prestige TV.
Right.
And now we're having big production houses like Marvel and stuff kind of come in and play in that space in like a weird way, where like Iron Fist came out, probably aside from like bad fight choreography and shitty racial politics. It was also released as supposedly like a part of a suite of other characters like Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, and Daredevil.
Yeah.
Jessica Jones is like properly, the first season of Jessica Jones.
First season is very good.
Is like proper quality television, like
absolutely.
that prestige TV.
Yeah.
Marvel sort of shot itself in the foot by releasing them together.
Right.
I guess the thing that I'm thinking about is like quality versus commercialism somehow, like this like idea of having to bring in a weighty theme in order to get us to take something frivolous like a comic book seriously.
Right.
So how do we elevate that art to like something that is considered to be quality that we don't feel guilty about watching?
Right. And I think that's interesting in terms of you're already taking these things from the film world to TV, which is a shift. It's not so much of a shift with Marvel, because I don't think anybody, even though people love Marvel films and even critics alike can kind of see that they're fun and one day we'll look back on them like we look back on Star Wars, etc. That's obviously true. They're fun and they're silly and they make people happy. They're not necessarily quality in the ways that people talk about.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sure people who know me who are listening to this being like, wow, I didn't realize Grace liked Marvel films. How embarrassing, right? And I'm like, have you ever spoken to me for more than 3 minutes? Not that I talk about Marvel all the time, but it's definitely up in my area of stuff, you know. I'm only human.
Yeah.
But thinking about the TV adaptations and the kind of differences between, even if we just compare 3 of them, which is Jessica Jones, Daredevil, and Iron Fist, Daredevil is probably the most quality of the 3 of those, and of all of them actually. It was the most critically acclaimed, it was the most revered, and it's all, you know, the world's on fire and it, you know, it's all very serious and dark. It's also really boring. You know, it's a slow show and it doesn't give you a lot. And there's this element of where quality TV shouldn't give you too much. Yeah. You know, it's not meant to hit these points, it's meant to be withholding. Iron Fist just beats you over the head in so many ways with its silliness and its but it's not self-reflexive enough to be silly either. Yeah. Right? It's just stupid. And then Jessica Jones rides this line, but it gets to be this cool feminist show that does all this really important stuff in the cultural moment. So it also gets kind of placed that way. But the second and I think third season of Jessica Jones are just horrific.
Oh yeah, I stopped watching.
Absolutely abominable, you know. The first season is perfect, but it should have ended there.
Yeah, absolutely. David Tennant, what a villain.
Incredible.
Sexy.
Oh, Lord.
Look.
I don't disagree, but I didn't think we put it on tape.
So in that case, if we're talking about something that is like good art, then so a pleasure that we shouldn't feel guilty about, are we saying that it has to have some sort of social value?
I think the answer is no, but I think increasingly our conversations, sort of the discourse, if you will.
Not the discourse.
I know a lot about discourse. Even its actual definition, which I won't share with you, but I just know I know it.
She has a PhD.
In discourse. Increasingly the conversations we have at representation are about how our representations must always have some kind of social purpose. And I go back to thinking about this all the time, where I want to just shake people and say, have you heard about this thing about the relationship between life and art? Do you know that this doesn't have to be, what burdens, what pressures do we place on our representations, and what the idea that the more we see things that are good, the better the world will become. And I'm not totally against that as a method or as a purpose or as a project, but I am hesitant to give it too much power either.
Yeah.
Because
I think the thing that I've been thinking about recently, which just like set me off, was like the reboot of Gossip Girl.
Right.
Have you seen the cast photo?
I have not.
Everyone is very diverse.
Sure.
There's a girl with a shaved head. Maybe they are non-binary. Often this is an indicator on network television. We've shaved a head. That's a non-binary person.
That's a they, them.
Yeah. But the thing that I thought while looking at that was like, what purpose does that serve? Because the point of Gossip Girl originally was that it's spoiled rich people being awful to each other.
Right.
What are you bringing forward by shoehorning spoiled rich people of like a different flavor into a storyline?
And also the whole point of Gossip Girl is that everyone is rich and privileged, but they have their own problems, and you're caught up in the spectacle of their rich people lives, and Gossip Girl has its own kind of class politics in the same way the OC does, where you take, Gossip Girl less so, where you take a slightly less rich man and put him in
a man who lives in a loft.
Yeah, he lives in a loft.
He lives in a loft. Like an animal.
In Williamsburg. And his father's obviously is hot rock star. So he's bringing no cool factor to that at all, But he's so angry that he becomes Gossip Girl by the end of the show, because he's so angry that he lives in a loft. And it's getting published in the New Yorker at 16 or whatever. And obviously that's different from example the OC, which is sort of the obvious comparison.
The other side of the tracks.
Right. Literally the other side of the tracks. Very interesting story in terms of race, right? Because that show only works because Ryan is also white. Yeah. If he was black, it would be a very different show. But it does matter, of course, that he's from a very racialized place.
I just want you to imagine the horrible thought that I just had. Welcome to the OC, bitch. But Ryan is black.
It's just horrifying to think about. As a flip side, what I like about rich kids? Bang. Nothing.
Great.
Really great.
Much better.
If Ryan is black, much more powerful moment. But yeah, of course, that show would be a very different show. And would it be a better or worse show? That's a really good question, actually, and that I've just asked myself. But it's a really good question thinking about representation of okay, we take Ryan Atwood from Chino. He has the weight of, he's from a place that's filled with immigrants, that his ex-girlfriend Teresa is obviously Latina, all these sorts of things. He's come from this place, right? But he's obviously white himself. Yeah. And then we place him in this incredibly white space again, but a totally different place. But if we made Ryan black and we take him from, a different part of California, we take him from Compton or whatever, is the show more or less racist to pick a black kid from, a quote unquote rough area and take him from his not good enough black family and then place him in the hills of California? I'm not so sure if that is a better show.
No.
So these questions are not as easy as often they get reduced to.
What do you think is driving that reduction?
I think that if I'm totally cynical about it, which I am not as a person particularly cynical. No. Can you confirm, Alexandra?
I can confirm.
That being diverse is cool now. Yeah. And there is a mass commodification that we see with something like the Gossip Girl reboot, which is these twin things that are being commodified constantly, or at least being attempted to be commodified. Executives have realized that there's a push here, which is one, reboots in general, right? Yeah. Gritty reboots.
We love a gritty reboot.
We do. There's a lot of them though. So we've got a gritty reboot of the OC. So you get people who are going to piggyback off their original love of the series, move to the new series, you have this inbuilt, ready-to-go audience, right? Then you have this other, and these people overlap, but this other group of people who are really invested in seeing more diversity on their screens, something I totally share. But is this in good faith? Doesn't matter. I don't know. But if you're asking the question of why there is more of this representation, I think that is why. I think
we are on the same page.
Yeah.
The default position being that this is a push for cash.
Yeah, I think so. And is that push for cash going to have good effects also? Is it giving people of color and of other kinds of diversities jobs in the entertainment industry? Totally. Is that awesome? Great. Is it nice for young queer kids to see themselves on screen? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have a shaved head? So does this person. That stuff does matter, you know. I always say to my students, you know, we have lots of conversations about these things. I am just fascinated by the fact that most of my students grew up in a post-Glee world, and the sharp, deeply lived difference that I see in them having lived through Glee. I cannot explain to you how different they feel about being gay. I think largely because of Glee. You know, for better or for worse.
Should we just have done this episode about Glee?
Look,
there's a lot to unpack.
There's too much to unpack. It's a whole podcast in and of itself. But there is something to be said about, actually, Glee as a show is a fascinating example of guilty pleasure, because the first season of Glee is really good, right? It's actually really well written. It's very fun. It's very dirty. It's not for kids at all. And it's quite like a silly, very self-reflexive show. And then the show becomes beloved by young people. Yeah. And beloved by, sorry to bring this up, but I always come back to this moment from the first season of Glee, which I haven't watched since it came out. And I was in high school, I think, when it came out. Where Rachel Berry, Leah Michelle's character, thinking about Glee now, we go back to this moment, the things that have happened, just insane. 3 of the major cast members are dead. It's just
3 of them were dead. 1 of them a pedophile.
It's too much, you know.
It's entirely too much.
But thinking about this great moment where Leah Michelle's character is, I think she's throwing up in a toilet, and her teacher, the sweet lady teacher whose name I forget, she's complaining about about not having a gag reflex, and the teacher says, "You'll appreciate that later. That'll come in handy later."
Thank you, Ryan Murphy.
Which is a great joke, right? Yeah. It's a great joke, but that was the show that Glee was. Yeah. And then Glee became something very different, right? And it became less good because of that. When it started to have to be a show that was meant to save young people's lives, it became a different show. And its quality, and I don't say this as a value judgment from me, but its quality in terms of the quality TV things you were thinking about earlier, it drops. Yeah. And I know when it happens, it drops the beginning of season 3, the Britney Spears episode. No plot. We never got a plot after that.
You know much more about Glee than I do.
I know much more about it than I thought I did.
The thing that I always think about with Glee, and this is just completely off topic, but the thing that I always think about with Glee is that when What's-His-Face died, the dead guy from Glee.
Which one, AJ?
The first one.
Which
the
one?
First one. The first one. Heroin overdose.
R.I.P.
R.I.P.
Corey Monteith.
Yeah, that's the one.
Thank you, Wesley.
But I always think about the fact that so he died in real life.
Totally.
Very tragic.
Sad. Very sad.
Very tragic. So they killed him on the show.
Yeah.
And then they made all of the cast, who were his work colleagues
and partner
for many years, they made them all sing a song about his death.
What song did they sing?
I can't remember. So
Wesley, please.
If I Die Young was the name of the song.
I don't even know that song.
By who?
But that's the saddest thing I've ever heard.
The American country music trio, the band Perry. And that is the band Perry is the name of the band.
Right. Okay. To get it back on track. Glee as a concept.
Yeah.
Quality decreases as, I guess, desire for inclusivity and...
Yeah, and I don't think that I don't think they go together necessarily, but I think when a show is trying to become, the savior of the broken, beaten and the damned, what was that reference. I
From
don't.
deep within her, a My Chem lyric. From deep within her soul.
And I wasn't guilty about it. But if you have a show that's trying to become the savior of young people, of young queer kids, the show is not going to be a hit with critics.
No.
And also it's not going to be very well written because that actually doesn't make for very good television. And these are the kinds of questions that I often find myself going back to. How do we save the world with TV when actually TV that saves the world is boring to watch? Because what makes good TV is conflict, is politics.
This is one of those things that I've often seen in because obviously I spend a lot of time in fandom spaces. One of the things
Nerd.
I'm a fucking dweeb. Shuckers. But one of the things that I always think about is that I've seen this real trend recently, probably in the last 2 to 4 years of nothing bad can happen to anyone on screen ever because that is my emotional support character and how dare you traumatize them.
Right.
And I just don't know how we got to that point where I'm well, something bad has to happen to your character because otherwise nothing happens in the show and they just live a nice life.
Right. And the classic example of that would be the kind of, what's it called? The lesbian death thing where people complain that the lesbian characters, one of them always dies.
Bury your gays.
Bury your gays. That's right. And obviously the original, maybe not the original, but the original and best Bury the Gays is obviously, and this is a spoiler from, I think, 2001, but is Willow and Tara from the great TV show of all time, the greatest TV show of all time, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Pour one out. R.I.P. in peace. Tara McClay.
More ethical.
You didn't know she had a last name. I knew it. And speaking of fandom, actually, I'll come back to this point, but I told someone that I was sleeping with recently that I wear this ring every day because Buffy the Vampire Slayer has one. And it's a bit embarrassing, isn't it? And instead of being like, no, this person went, yeah, that is embarrassing. Still in bed.
And the moral of the story to any young queer kids listening is that you can be a fucking nerd and still get laid.
It's true. That's true, actually. You're right. I've been a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan since I was 8, and I've been wearing this ring since I was 13. And I still got it. And get it, indeed.
That's been my inspirational corner for the queer role model that I've always been determined to be.
This is the representation that people really need, is fat dyke sluts.
Fat dyke sluts. Welcome to our new podcast, Fat Dyke Sluts.
You too can kiss your crush. Oh, God.
You just got to believe in yourself, baby.
You just got to manifest it. But going back to the Bury Your Gays discourse, obviously the original, Tara and Willow, and, at the time, Joss Whedon, is he cancelled? I think so. I don't want to talk about it.
Probably at this point.
I don't want to talk about it. I really, really have to tell you that I don't want to talk about it. Again, let's go back to that relationship between life and art.
Life, art, what is it?
I don't know. It's my life's great question. But, they killed Tara because it mattered.
Yeah.
Right. They killed her because that death is the catalyst for the end of that season. It's the catalyst for Willow as a character. It makes her go insane and try to end the world. That mattered, right? They didn't kill her because they didn't like her or because of homophobia. They killed her because that relationship was beloved.
Yeah.
And I understand that a pattern develops and that's an issue. And it's not one that I've ever particularly identified with. I can't personally think of other examples that have touched me in the same way.
No.
I don't watch The 100.
No.
But it's not something that totally resonates with me. But I think part of the reason that it doesn't resonate with me is that I enjoy the emotional rewards that come with the death of a beloved character. And the other relationships in that show, for example, that end for all these other horrific, sad reasons. Oz has to leave because it's a werewolf and he has to protect Willow, and Angel has to leave because he has a spin-off. And,
Angel has to leave because he has other contractual obligations.
Exactly, and Spike sacrifices himself for the world. These are big, important, mythical deaths or the WB is no longer interested in the show, but so I'm not convinced by arguments that in order to have good queer representation or have good other kinds of representation, that things always have to be good experiences where people have nice experiences and everyone is happy all the time. Because what is it that we want from our media? And I'm not sure if that's what I want from mine.
No. I think this is one of the things that Catherine was saying in the piece about Girls, was that Girls received all of this criticism partially because it was tackling themes of like weighty themes,
weighty
things that are socially important,
right,
as part of its, or considered to be socially important as part of its thing. And so as such, despite it appearing amongst a spate of other prestige TV, it received a lot more close criticism because it was seen to be engaging with
feminism and
weighty subject
and women
matter.
And young people, and it was meant to be for women by women.
Yeah,
you know, and it was obviously meant to be an indication or a representation of Lena Dunham's own life of being a young artistic person in Brooklyn or whatever, and young women in the city doing their best. They've got internships. They're having sex. Should it be protected or not? It's a question for that episode, you know. These are the big themes, you know. And also the show was given a lot of that burden, but the show is meant to be funny. The show is light. And I actually saw a tweet recently, and I feel the discourse is coming back around, where someone wrote recently just that tweet that just said, is it time that we can all acknowledge that Girls was actually good?
Oh no, the discourse.
And I was like, it was good. I think the first season in particular is a good show. Should it be more diverse? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is it a problem that everyone on that show is white? Absolutely it is, you know.
Yeah.
Of course it is. But a lot of the controversy around it when it came out, no one said the same thing about Seinfeld or about Frasier or about, you know, these were questions that were placed on Lena Dunham for all of her fair criticisms.
So many fair.
Some of them unfair, some of them deeply fair.
Some of them extremely fair.
Have me back on for an episode about Lena Dunham, honestly.
Could talk about it for days.
Honestly. But the show is clever and it's fun and it has some great moments, and the burden placed on it was disproportionate.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the other sort of question in terms of like good art, you know. If we're thinking about like, rather than bury your gays as a trope, maybe just fridging women.
Right.
So the classic, if you have a female character, she must die. At some point she ends up in a fridge, which is pulled out of like noir comics. If we think about things that like never mean anything, Supernatural, which we talked about earlier. How many female characters died? How many of Sam and Dean's girlfriends
Every one
died?
of them, I think.
And no one cared.
No, because you don't like it. The only female character in that show that I said the word female a lot today. The only female character in that show you're meant to like is
Jo.
I think it's Jo, right? We only like Jo. I love Jo.
And she dies.
Yeah. And they never get together. They have a final kiss. Their only kiss, I think.
Yeah.
And she dies.
Yeah.
Oh God, that breaks my heart just thinking about it. Jo.
I think it's the reason that breaks your heart though is that you're thinking about it in the context of other better written things.
No. I think this is a great moment, right? I genuinely think the moment where she's about to sacrifice herself, her and her mother are about to sacrifice themselves for the good of the world. I think it's quite a large sacrifice.
There are 15 seasons and the world ends 9 times.
Okay, well, they're about to
season.
sacrifice themselves for something important. And Dean is essentially strapping her to a bomb, I think, essentially. It's something like that. And as he's doing it, he's sort of saying goodbye and he kisses her and he's sort of crying and it's this quite sweet, chaste kiss. But it's like this acknowledgement for each other and also for the fans that, of course, there was something there all along. And
yeah. Whereas if you look at, we'll say, the last season, Dean and Castiel.
Right, which I can't at all acknowledge that happened. I haven't seen it myself.
Did you at least watch the clip out of context?
I have watched the clip out of context.
It's insane.
I still don't agree entirely that what is happening in the scene is that Castiel is revealing his undying love for Dean. I know this is people's interpretation of it. I can't be sure about that because it is too insane.
Would you be more sure if I reminded you that the
Spanish
translation
is just like
explicitly used
it's just like
te amo.
Te amo. Look, I know that this happened. That was in fact the first version of it I saw. So I had to go back. But it is unclear to me what happened there. And I can't speak to it because, again, I haven't seen... I've seen less than half of that show.
Yeah.
But I'm still would consider myself someone who likes that show, you know. We may have to ask Professor Catherine Driscoll.
Professor Catherine Driscoll.
Please help us. But yeah, I am unsure about that to this day.
Yeah.
And that is all I feel confident saying on tape.
I like to think that he was gay and got sucked into super hell. The kind of hell.
Like Lil Nas X.
Just like Lil Nas X. Dean is up and twerking on the devil, and the devil is enjoying it. Possibly not even the devil, possibly some sort of super devil.
Oh, God. Oh, Lord. That is funny.
I guess let's talk about something you like, Sharkey.
Oh, should we talk about the things I love?
We talk about the things you love.
Things I love that... Yeah, I think that I love many things that do not make me cool, that do not bring... I was talking to somebody recently and I said, you know, I used to be an art house loser and now I just want to be happy, as I've said earlier, right?
Now you're a fucking sick guy.
Yeah, and now I'm a sick cunt who does sharkers and is obsessed with King Kong films. But I also want to be clear that, like, I recognize the other kinds of social rewards that come with that position, right? That, like, it's not as if that doesn't position me in a different way, you know? Like, we exist in this space that is both, I genuinely do think that Channing Tatum is one of the great actors of our generation, right? I think he is genuinely incredibly talented. I think he makes great film choices. I think he's
Really
incredibly
does.
underrated.
That Coen Brothers movie. What
It's
a slapper.
fantastic. He's incredible in it.
Yeah.
You know, I just genuinely think he's amazing. But also there is its own kind of positionality that comes with being somebody who's like, well, I love Channing Tatum, you know? But also I genuinely do, you know? And so I think that I loved, you know, and I still love a lot of films that would make sense in certain kinds of contexts, you know?
In enjoying a variety of media,
Yeah.
you're not necessarily positioning one over the other in terms of its relation to you or to the world necessarily.
No, and I think it's that I've taken a step back. I think that it's like I can take a step back and realize that there's interesting things to be said about all kinds of different films and TV, some of which this is really obviously well made. This is really incredible. This is a great film. Some of my favorite films are indeed good films, right? Or films that fit certain kinds of criteria. And I'm not even talking about films that might win Oscars because, of course, those films don't count.
No.
Films that win Oscars, not always, but often. You know, think about some of the films that won Best Picture in the last couple of years. Green Book. Have you actually seen that movie? It is not good. It's not a good movie,
Bad
you know. The King's Speech, entirely forgettable, right? Moonlight, fantastic.
Great film.
I'll give you that. But I liked La La Land. I liked them both, you know. And, you know, The Social Network is a much better film than King's Speech, and that matters. But I think that I'm less seduced by aligning myself with films that have certain kinds of promises involved in them that position me as a kind of person who likes film, you know.
Yeah.
And actually I'm more interested in stepping back and thinking about film as a thing that functions in the world.
Yeah.
And part of that is just wanting to love the movie Independence Day, which I do.
Because it's one of the greatest films.
It's one of the great films of all time.
Yeah.
And this is the moment of the podcast, Alex, where you should ask me what my favorite film is.
What is your favorite film, Grace?
My favorite film, let's do it together, is The Princess Diaries 2,
Royal
Royal Engagement. And it's my favorite film. I think it's a perfect film.
Is it because of Chris Pine's hair?
It's not to do with Chris Pine's hair. Again, people being hot, both in film and in my life, is
Very important.
Very important to me. And it's sort of a guiding force in my politics and morals. But
Moral compass and guided entirely by my content.
oh God, no, that's not true. I don't think.
For the most part.
I can't confirm nor deny.
How hot are they? I need some qualifiers.
No, that's not true. But you know, it's no, don't be silly. No, but also, I totally forgot my point. I'm having an existential crisis. Is that true?
Have I revealed too much?
Oh God. Hot people. Yeah, Princess Diaries 2, that's right. So no, it's because it's so fun. It's got so many layers. It's Gary Marshall. It's really well written. There are these great comedic moments. It's just the perfect film. It's the perfect length. And as you know,
it's extremely important that a film be the correct length.
That is my main criteria for any good film or any bad film. Films sit in two categories for me: too long and the correct length.
Just to be clear, my secondary idea for a podcast was called Minute Movie Reviews with Grace Sharkey.
What? Really?
And it would just be you and I leave the cinema and I ask you whether or not the film was too long.
This needs to happen. It needs to happen.
It's too long. This movie is too long. And remember, a film that is 3 hours long doesn't mean it's too long. It's not about how long the film is.
It's about the pacing.
It's about the pacing. It's about if it needed an editor. It's about if it had a plot that made sense. It's about if I was enjoying it.
It's about if there were too many slow panning shots of the landscape.
Oh my Lord, you know how I feel about that.
I really want to know your opinion on the Snyder Cut.
I couldn't give a shit, mate. Because you know what Zack Snyder does? He makes big movies, but they're too long.
They're all too long.
They're all too long, and they're
convoluted.
They're convoluted. Has anyone actually seen a Zack Snyder film? Why do they keep letting him make films?
I watched Sucker Punch recently.
It is a bad movie.
It's a bad movie because Sucker Punch has had this moment where people, particularly younger women who were maybe like too young for the discourse when it came out and maybe too young to actually watch the film, have swung it back around and been like, I don't know why this film got so much criticism.
Because it's really bad.
And it's because it's a bad movie.
Yeah. And
it's an extended rape fantasy with like schoolgirl costumes and slow pan upskirts.
Sure.
That was like, what if we set it in the sexy fantasy realm?
So the film makes no sense, right?
No,
so I only saw the film once. I believe in the cinema with you, I'm guessing.
I don't think so.
Okay. I've seen the film once and it sticks with me. Things about it stick with me. John Hamm is in it, who's hot. So again, I'm interested.
Yeah.
Right?
Already down.
And actually also Abby Cornish is in it. And at the time, I feel complicated about Abby Cornish now, but at the time I was a big Abby Cornish fan.
And she's an extremely talented actress.
She's an extremely talented actress.
For some reason gone
I don't know what happened there,
Burko.
but she's an Australian treasure. Somersault is an incredible film. Candy is amazing. She's amazing in both those movies. See, I've seen movies.
I've seen films.
But
Bright Star.
Oh my God.
She cries
She's
so
just
beautifully.
so beautiful. That movie is like the most heartbreaking film, right? The casting is just incredible. Anyway, and she's hot. She's got these great legs, you know, and it's all these panning of her in ballet costumes. And then suddenly they're in this like other world where they're punching. But the film makes no sense. There's too much dancing and panning into this other world that makes no sense.
How do we activate the other world? By the power of sexy dance and slow pan upskirts.
And I'm not the kind of feminist I'm not someone who doesn't think critically about ideas about hypersexualization or things like that. You know, as you said, I wrote my PhD in pornography. I'm not technically the kind of feminist who's like, women may never sexy dance. It is disempowering.
Yeah.
No, we can be empowered through the sexy dance. Yeah. But that's not my issue with it, right? Like my issue with it is that it's bad. It's that it's really boring and it makes no sense.
It makes no sense. It makes because I had seen all these young women engaging with it. And I was like, well, if I think about when it came out, it's probably at the time where there was a lot of sort of what we were talking about before, where like socially valuable art.
Sure.
It has to be socially valuable. And there's, sometimes that criticism goes a little bit like 36 Crazy Fists and it's just swinging and hoping to hit something. And so I was like, maybe I'm misremembering this film.
Yeah.
And maybe I was unfair to it and maybe it is something that I would enjoy now.
Yeah.
Incorrect. It's a bad film. It doesn't make any sense.
No.
It thinks it's doing something smart. So it's like, look at this. And it's one of the things that I hate about Nolan. Which
we disagree about.
We disagree about, but like Tenet,
which I love.
Tenet was Robert Pattinson looks hot.
Tenet. It's a good movie.
Do you think the movie is good, or do you think Robert Pattinson is hot?
You should see. I wish everyone could see my face right now where I'm like, oh no. No, it's a good movie. It's a good movie, but you're right. Everyone in it is very hot. But I didn't like it we watched it in the cinema together and we're like, what is going on? This movie is outrageous. Everyone waddling backwards is so stupid.
Just jogging backwards, baby.
Everyone jogging backwards is so stupid. And as much as I do love him, Kenneth Branagh in it, I'm not into. I don't think he nails it.
No.
His Russian accent is confusing.
It's bad.
The whole vibe of him is confusing. I think it was a miscast. I think they could have gotten, I don't know.
Literally anyone else.
And I genuinely do like Kenneth Branagh a lot, although I feel I'm annoyed with him about what he did to Emma. But, you know.
We've never forgiven him.
We've never forgiven him for what he did to Emma. But I do genuinely quite like him, but I didn't vibe him in that film.
No.
It didn't quite work.
Also, that poor tall woman.
She's just, although she's allowed to wear heels in that movie, unlike in The Night Manager, where she plays the exact same character.
Yeah, where she's a trapped woman.
She's another trapped woman. So beautiful.
We found this tall, beautiful woman. We must put her in a box.
With a mean kind of arms dealer.
Yeah, with a mean guy who sells guns.
To be fair, The Night Manager a much better show than the film Tenet. There's no time travel in The Night Manager. Yeah. But there is Tom Hiddleston and lots of punching, and I like that in a show. Because again, Tom Hiddleston, very hot.
Pretty sexy.
Looking forward to the next season of The Crown, where very tall Elizabeth Debicki is going to be another trapped woman.
As Princess Diana.
Princess Diana.
And as Charles as the arms dealer. That's right. And so, but I rewatching Tenet, which for some reason I have rewatched 4 or 5 times since we saw it in the cinema, and each time I love it more, and I don't know why.
I think if you can...
Increasingly, I think it is Robert Pattinson fans.
Perhaps the more I ponder it.
The more I ponder it, the more I realize that those are my favorite scenes. There's a great moment where he says, "Don't be so dramatic." I think it is the perfect moment in a film.
I think the thing that I think Robert Pattinson in that film, great. Love him.
Sure.
What a little weirdo. Just a little freak. Love
Just
that.
a little freak. And I think, is it John David Washington?
Oh, he's great.
He's so good. He's so good in that. It's a beautiful film where so much of that story and world building is done through just moments of this character, the main character, the protagonist, having to ask the stupidest fucking questions in order to move the plot along.
And he does it beautifully.
He does it so well, where he makes it so charming, so invested, where it's like, oh, have you ever heard of this man? Oh, you mean this man who has done this? Here's some information I know about this. Good. Like, I'm Michael Caine, you know, like, and it's just like, it's just ridiculous, you know, but he does it so well, you know.
I think the performances and stuff are great. The thing that I don't like about Nolan is that I think Nolan is constantly trying to be like, I am an exceptional sci-fi director. And I just like, look, Inception was fine.
I was going to say, has everyone seen Inception recently? That movie bangs. That movie fucks. It does. Marion Cotillard she's just so seductive in that.
This has been, are they hot or is it a good movie?
I don't think Leonardo DiCaprio was hot post about 2000.
1998.
So I'm not against. I don't think that's why. There's not that many. Oh, no, Tom Hardy's in that. Never mind.
We love Tom.
So, yeah, you don't like Christopher Nolan because you think that he is...
He does my least favorite thing with all film, which is that if something doesn't have the good writing to back up its pretentious premise, then don't fucking make it.
Right.
Because, like, you are just tricking yourself into thinking that you're smart, and you're tricking stupid people into also thinking that they're smart. And I have to listen to that.
It is
a
stupid person's film.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Yeah, it's a bit smoke and mirrors. Like, isn't this film clever?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, no.
No.
Oh, no.
It's just two timelines traveling next to each other.
That's why I like it. Oh, boy. Everyone, there's so many things going on. Oh, my God.
Everyone's moving backwards so quickly.
Oh, we just saw this bit, but now that's backwards. Now it's different.
Backwards.
Oh, my God. It's all making sense.
Yeah. I think, because that's the other thing that I think is that... and another thing. Because the other thing that I think about it is that, like, that premise, I can see that you know, the pretensions of like classic sci-fi are there. But also I think if you like waterboarded Christopher Nolan and was like, well, like, why did you make this film?
Yeah.
He would eventually crack and admit that it was just because he thought the ocean would look pretty fucking sick going backwards. Like,
yeah. But I mean, I guess I'm like, that's a perfectly good reason.
I mean, I think that's a good reason
but
to
I
make
think
a
that
film.
he's not being in good faith about it.
That's what I want. Is I want the version of that where you're just like, you know, put the ocean backwards.
Yeah,
it looks
yeah.
fucking sick.
Yeah,
like,
right.
just be honest about what you're doing with the film, and then I can sit and calmly enjoy
Done.
Robert Pattinson's face blown up real big. So handsome.
So handsome.
Just a bunch of queers sitting in a room.
Delicious.
So handsome.
So handsome.
What's my favorite film, Grace?
Oh, Lord. Do I know?
Well, look, it changes all the time, but like in terms of things that I am deeply passionate about, John Wick.
Oh, sure, of
is
course. John Wick. Yeah,
the perfect film.
Right. There's no plot.
There's no plot. Someone kills his dog. He's a bit sad about it.
But it's not even there's no plot. There's just no. It's just it's plotted so simple.
Yeah.
And it makes sense.
And it's not trying to be anything other than what it is. It's not saying, look at how deep this action movie is.
Right.
And even when you get to the third one,
I was just going to say, yeah.
world building happening.
Right.
It's still not deep.
No, it's enough. They give you enough to be like, there is a world here.
Yeah.
You're in it now. Come into it, you know.
Knife museum.
Welcome to the Knife Museum.
Where are we? Knife museum.
Knife museum. When we saw that in the movie, it's like, you don't even, it's almost like they're in a knife museum.
Knife museum.
But it's true, you know, and they just throw knives at each other, and then they're sort of, Agent Kate Dillon arrives and, you know, gives some world building, but we don't need, that's just to support the knife throwing, right?
Yeah,
like it's not
just there to,
and that's fine, you know, and I don't need my films. I don't need my films. I don't need the films that I watch.
I just want to feed my birds.
I just want to, but that's true. That's the change, right? Like I just want to feed my birds, you know, like, yeah, under no circumstances do I think that all films are created equal or that there isn't a place for important kind of, you know, artistically impressive art house cinema that, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my favorite director is Jim Jarmusch.
Sure. Yeah.
And I like it because it's a gentle wank.
Totally. And I mean, one of the films I just can't get out of my head, I saw it at the film festival a few years ago and I haven't seen it since, is Certain Women by Kelly Reichardt. It's just this incredibly affecting film. It's not even a big emotional film, but it's one of those slow moving, it's in Montana. You know, it follows these three stories that are not connected, but then you find out they kind of are. It's incredibly subtle and it's like a slow burn, and it just totally haunts me in this like really beautiful way where I think about those characters all the time, you know. And so films like that aren't these big stupid films that are meant to kind of make you feel big things and are funny, all these things. Obviously I do enjoy those films and they are my kind of go-to. But I'm not immune to the rewards of films that don't do those things. Yeah. But I don't think I gravitate toward them as much as I used to because I'm less invested in the kinds of like identity formations that they provide or, you know.
I'm not desperately seeking myself.
No, exactly.
And I think that's been the big change in terms of how I've watched and enjoyed movies.
Right. And I think that we're fools to think that the kinds of films that we like aren't about who we are. Yeah. You know, and that aren't about trying to tell other people who we are. Yeah. You know.
Yeah. Who am I?
AJ!
I was going to say dumb and sexy. Got anything to plug, Sharkey?
Oh, no. No, I don't I don't have anything to plug. I'm just here to have fun. I could plug myself if anyone wants to date me. I'm actually not very available at all, but I'd enjoy the ego boost.
Dance card, but maybe just if anyone would like to send confessions of love.
Oh, please. I could really use some more. As long as I don't have to feel guilty about them, please do.
No, just tell her she's hot.
Please.
On Twitter. At Grace Sharkey.
At Grey Shark O.
Shark O.
The nickname given to you by me. Given to me by you.
Sharko.
That's my nickname.
Send her love letters. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Everyone likes some. I really like. Now I'm just embarrassed that you're here.
I know, it's funny, isn't it? I thought you've been like, it's fine, Grace. Why are you being weird? It's weird, AJ.
It's weird.
That's why you're being weird, because it's weird.
Because it's weird.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's fine. All right,
okay.
I'm just gonna look at my phone.
Yeah, don't look at me.
Okay.